My father remarried when I was 29. I tried to be happy for him, I really did. But within 2 years, I was cut out of family dinners, excluded from holidays, and slowly erased from my own father's life. When he died, his new wife got everything. The house, the savings, the investments, everything he had spent 40 years building. I received a single envelope at the will reading. No money, no property, just a small card that said, "Ask Margaret to play you the voicemail." I had no idea who Margaret was. Neither did anyone else in that room. Then his wife stood up, and in a voice nobody expected, she said, "I'm Margaret, and I think it's time everyone heard what Robert actually wanted. My name is James Calloway. I'm 43 years old, and this is the story of how my father's last voicemail, recorded the night before he died, delivered by the woman I had spent 2 years resenting, gave me back everything I thought I had lost, not just the inheritance. Something more important than that. If you've ever felt erased by someone you loved, stay with me. This one matters. My parents divorced when I was 11. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no court battles, no custody war. It was quiet and sad in the way that some endings are, like a fire that runs out of fuel before anyone decides to put it out. My mother moved to Portland. My father stayed in the house where I grew up, in a small city in northern Georgia, and I split my time between them until I was old enough to stop splitting. Dad and I were close in the particular way fathers and sons are close, when neither of them is very good at talking about feelings. We watched football. We worked on his old truck on weekends. We had dinner every Sunday when I was in town. The same diner, the same booth, the same order for 15 years. It wasn't poetic, it was just consistent, and consistency was my father's love language. He was 58 when he met Margaret. She worked at the physical therapy clinic where he went after a knee replacement. Not his therapist, the front desk manager. She was 52, recently widowed, quiet and competent and warm in a way that apparently caught him completely off guard. He mentioned her once in passing, then twice, then started bringing her name into conversations where she didn't quite belong, which is how I knew it was serious before he said anything official. I met her for the first time at a dinner he arranged carefully, at a nicer restaurant than our usual diner. She was polite, composed, clearly nervous. I was polite and composed and also clearly nervous. We made it through the evening without incident. I told Dad afterward that she seemed nice. I meant it. I told myself everything would be fine. They married 14 months after they met. Small ceremony, immediate family only. I was there. I gave a toast that I had practiced 6 times and delivered without crying, which felt like an athletic achievement. The first year was manageable. Margaret and I weren't close, but we were respectful. Holiday dinners happened. Phone calls with Dad continued, though slightly less frequently. I told myself this was normal, that marriage changes rhythms, that Dad deserved happiness, that I was being mature about it. Then Margaret's daughter moved back from Seattle. Her name was Patricia. She was 35, recently divorced, with 2 young children and a talent for filling rooms with her own energy. She moved into a house 2 miles from Dad and Margaret, and suddenly the gravitational center of my father's life shifted entirely. Patricia's kids became his grandchildren in every practical sense. Pick up from school, Saturday afternoons, birthday parties. Dad lit up around them in a way I hadn't seen in years. I tried not to be resentful. I mostly failed. The exclusions started small. A family dinner I wasn't told about until afterward. A holiday gathering that was just keeping it small this year. A trip to the mountains that I saw on Facebook, posted by Patricia, tagged with my father's smiling face. I called Dad about that one. He apologized, said it had come together quickly, said we'd plan something soon. We never did. By the end of the second year, our Sunday dinners had become monthly calls, and the monthly calls had become occasional texts. I stopped reaching out as often because reaching out had started to feel like standing at a door that was politely but firmly not opening. I told myself he was just happy. I told myself to let him be happy. I told myself a lot of things that year that I'm not sure I believed. Dad had his first heart attack 3 years into the marriage. He recovered, but the doctors were clear. His heart was compromised, his lifestyle needed to change, and he needed to take his situation seriously. I flew down immediately when it happened. I stayed for a week. Margaret was gracious about having me there, whatever tension existed between us set aside for something that mattered more. For a few months after, things were better between Dad and me. Near-death experiences have a way of clarifying priorities. We talked more. He came to visit me for the first time in 2 years. We went back to the diner, the same booth, and he ordered the same thing, and it felt for a little while like nothing had changed. Then the rhythms slowly returned to what they'd become: distance, politeness, occasional contact. His second heart attack happened on a Wednesday morning 18 months later. Margaret called me from the hospital. I was on a flight within the hour, but by the time I landed, he was already gone. I sat in an airport bathroom for 20 minutes before I could make myself walk to the rideshare pickup. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I remember the fluorescent lights of the hallway. I remember Margaret's face when she saw me. Not guarded, not careful, just genuinely devastated. Grief does that sometimes. It strips everything else away and leaves only the real thing underneath. 3 weeks after the funeral, we gathered at the office of my father's attorney. Margaret, Patricia, me, and a cousin who had been mentioned in previous versions of the will. The attorney, a careful man named Howard Briggs who had known my father for over 20 years, read through the document methodically. Personal items, divided practically. The house, to Margaret. The savings and investment accounts, to Margaret. A smaller account, designated for Patricia's children's education. For me, an envelope. Sealed. My name on the front in my father's handwriting. I stared at it. Around the table, nobody spoke. Patricia looked at her hands. Margaret looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Briggs said the envelope was the entirety of my designated bequest. He slid it across the table. I picked it up. It was light. Inside was a small note card, the kind you'd find in any drugstore. 3 sentences in my father's handwriting. James, I'm sorry I ran out of time to say this right. Ask Margaret to play you the voicemail. I looked up. Margaret was already reaching into her bag. She placed her phone on the table. She had the voicemail pulled up already, which told me she had been carrying it, ready, waiting for this moment. She pressed play. My father's voice filled that conference room. Gravelly, slightly out of breath the way he'd been since the first heart attack, but unmistakably him. Margaret, it's me. I know you'll know what to do with this, so I'm leaving it with you. If something happens, and I think something might be happening tonight, I don't feel right. I need James to know some things I didn't say. James, if you're hearing this, I made mistakes. I let distance grow because it was easier than having the conversation that would have closed it. That's on me. Not on Margaret, not on Patricia, on me. I was a coward about it and I'm sorry. The will is what it is. Margaret needs security and I needed to make sure she had it. But there's something Briggs doesn't know about yet because I only did it last week. I set up a transfer. Account number is in the safe deposit box at First Georgia Bank. Margaret has the key. It's not everything, but it's enough to matter. It was always supposed to be yours. I just kept putting off the paperwork like I put off everything that made me uncomfortable. I don't know if this fixes anything. Probably it doesn't. But I need you to know that the distance between us was never because I stopped loving you. It was because I didn't know how to come back after I let it go too far. And I was too proud and too scared to try. You're my son. You were always my son. Everything else was just me getting in my own way. I love you, James. I should have said it more. The voicemail ended. The room was completely silent. I became aware that I was crying only because Margaret reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I looked at her. She was crying too. He recorded it the night before he died, she said quietly. He made me promise to play it if anything happened. He made me promise I wouldn't let you leave that room without hearing it. The safe deposit box contained exactly what Dad had described. Account transfer documents, already processed, already in my name. He had done the paperwork himself, quietly, the week before he died, without telling his attorney or Margaret. Just done it, the way he fixed things, without announcement, without ceremony, just making sure it was handled. It wasn't a fortune, but it was significant, more than I expected, enough to matter, as he said. Margaret and I had coffee the following morning, just the two of us, for the first time in the 3 years she had been my father's wife. We talked for 2 hours. She told me things about his last years that I hadn't known, that he talked about me often, that he kept a photo of us on his desk that he never moved, that he had drafted and deleted texts to me more times than she could count. He didn't know how to cross the distance once it existed, she said. He thought you were angry with him. He was afraid you didn't want to hear from him. I had thought the same thing about him. 2 people, waiting for the other one to move first. Both too proud and too scared. Both assuming the silence meant something it didn't. I see Patricia's kids occasionally now. They call me Uncle James, which I didn't expect, and which undoes me slightly every time. Margaret and I text sometimes. Nothing deep, just the ordinary maintenance of 2 people who are connected by someone they both loved and both lost. I used to think my father chose his new family over me. I understand now that it was more complicated and more human than that. He didn't choose against me. He just didn't know how to hold both things at once. And instead of asking for help with that, he let the gap grow until it felt uncrossable. I've thought a lot about what it costs to let pride win over connection. What it costs in years, in dinners, in ordinary Sundays that don't happen because nobody wanted to be the first one to pick up the phone. My father found his way back to me in the only moment he had left. A voicemail, recorded at night, when he didn't feel right, handed to a woman he trusted to make sure I heard it. It wasn't the inheritance that mattered. It was 3 minutes of his voice telling me I was still his son. I would have traded every dollar in that account to have heard it while he was still alive to say it. Don't wait. Whatever you're waiting for, don't wait. If this story made you think of someone you've been meaning to call, go call them. Right now, before this video ends. And if you're new here, subscribe. Every week, a story about love, loss, and the words we leave too late.